Hey, everyone. Good. I shared the right window. All right. So look at the agenda at the bottom and see if there are additional items. We have a couple of important ones and a couple of ones to close on.
Joe, just a short agenda item from me. I would really like to get the content for those that are speaking at SmartNIC Summit, so I can turn that into the SmartNIC Summit team. So if folks have worked on slides, that would be great. I've seen some from Boris that he and Dong Wei were gonna that Dong Wei was gonna present. He was working with him on that. But I've not seen any other slides from any of the other team members that are presenting.
Paul, myself, and Mark have worked on the API slides. I'll share it with you today.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. Anyone else have slides that are ready to go?
Oh, no, not yet. We have fairly standard set of slides from the use case group, but we'll review and then send it to you.
That would be excellent. Thank you, sir.
All right. And I'm looking for John, Tazi, or Oren. And then also looking for Prasoon and Dong.
Prasoon just joined. He's just connecting to audio.
I see that.
I'm gonna ping Don now and see where he's at. I'll let you know when we get.
Yep. All right. So content. Okay. So Paul, anything else on the content needed for the SmartNIC Summit in 2 weeks?
So yeah, we've got two presentations. That one is the keynote, 10 minutes. Probably use a lot of the just generic content that Linux Foundation is right now working on making it match our branding guidelines, colors, fonts, that sort of thing.
Right.
So that's coming. Should be done soon. The website is on track to be done by SmartNIC Summit, and then just need the content for the half day tutorial from folks. So those are the three things of update note about SmartNIC Summit.
All right. So that means Prasoon, you and I need to get together to decide on the final content. Or sorry, VinCat. So sorry, VinCat, you and I need to get together to decide on the final content either tomorrow or Monday, Tuesday. I'll text you in Slack and we can decide it that way.
Yeah, sure.
All right. So next topic. So Boris is stepping down from the lifecycle and provisioning chair. He's still going to stay involved in OPI and work on storage APIs and storage code for OPI DPUs and DPU/IPUs. He's going to need to be replaced. He will stay maintainer, and we're looking to expand the maintainer pool. which is good. You'll see more on that in a couple of weeks. But we need to replace Boris as the chair of lifecycle and provisioning. I want to say from the TSC point of view, thank you, Boris, for almost a year of leading the lifecycle and provisioning group. Excellent work, excellent progress. So we really appreciate it. If anyone else wants to say anything, but yeah, we're getting the
Joe, I would second your comments. I don't think we would be where we are in terms of progress this year without Boris.
No, we wouldn't.
Thank you, Boris.
Yeah, I agree completely. All right. Now, that said, so Boris, do you want to say anything?
No, thank you guys for your kind words. Thank you.
Yeah, we all definitely appreciate it. All right. So now we got to replace Boris as the lifecycle and provisioning chair. So if we only have one volunteer, then it's just do we have any objections to that? If not, then that person is it. If we have a couple of volunteers, we basically we'll have to vote, which I guess we'll do next week, or we could do it on the spot, whatever you guys think. But we need at least a volunteer to run the life cycle and provisioning group. All right. Don't all speak at once.
Do we have a volunteer?
I don't know. Do we have a volunteer? And it doesn't have to be somebody from the TSC, obviously. And you don't even have to be a voting, you don't have to be a full voting member even. It's just, the only real requirement is that you're interested in organizing and driving the life cycle and provisioning for OPI, DPU, IPUs forward.
I wonder if we could advertise for this, so you don't have to put it on the website, but I certainly would prefer it to not be a vendor, I guess. I like that it was Boris and an OEM driving this, because of that they were the consumer of a lot of what we were producing. So ideally we would try to preserve that. So maybe we need to actively go out and pursue those that that would ultimately consume the provisioning content that we produce.
Okay, so we can generate an email and Slack post. So,
Boris may have suggestions based on who were participating, somebody that we could actively pursue and request, because there are different folks who are looking at different aspects of this. So in the existing group, Boris, if you have any suggestions, you could maybe send it offline so that we are not volunteering somebody else. But at the same time, I think it's good to look at existing folks who helped in the past as potential targets.
Yeah, I can definitely do that. There are a couple of people, Reza from HP, Summer from ARM. There are a lot of active participants in the life cycle. Have no idea if they're interested or not, but I second Dan's suggestion to advertise it on email and Slack and see who is interested.
Yeah, I think that list would be useful. We don't need to volunteer them publicly, but if you could send it to Joe, right, and we could go talk to them offline personally and see, because it's good to actively pursue them. But your suggestions will be extremely useful for us.
Yep, that'll work as well. Any other suggestions? All right. So take this back to your teams. Again, TSC members and actually everyone on the call, see if you have anyone or if you want to volunteer. Again, you don't have to do it on the spot. But you know, again, we have to resolve the line of succession. It's not quite like a royal house, but you know, it's a music or the what is it, the HBO show, or it's Max now. Anyway, all right, cool. Okay, catch up on the notes, and then we'll move to the. Oh, so I'm going to stop sharing. Dan, pop your slides up, and there was a you know, some back and forth on the pull request discussion list.
Yep.
So pop your notes up, and let's tackle that thing next. We may be able to do it fairly quickly here.
Yes, I hope so. All right, so let me pop this up. So some background. I wrote a proposal about sort of shifting the conversation to a node or a system as opposed to a chip. But in the pull request comments, I think Joe brought up an alternative that I think I'd want to start with first. And because it's so concise, the idea is that we would continue to use DPU, IPU in our documentation, in our code, whatever. And that DPU, IPU term can either refer to a system containing the chips or the system itself, or I'm sorry, or the chip itself. And then when you need to shorten it, you just shorten it to XPU. So you just wildcard the first word in the TLA. I think that, you know, this sort of sidesteps the alphabet wars by, you know, using a wildcard, and also, you know, preserves all of our, you know, DPU, IPU like verbiage that we already have on the website, so that it's not a pivot or any sort of like you know, signaling, you know, implicit signaling to the external world. You know, we keep our naming the same, but hey, you know, this is like 10 characters or something. So when we need to shorten it, we shorten it to XPU. So what do people think about that alternative solution? Is that really the only new term that we would be codifying, and I think it's already been used in certain contexts, but you just haven't been consistent, is that the XPU term would be, you know, I would you know, close this PR and then open a new one and basically put this sentence in our main README, and then we can start propagating out you know, where we've used DPU or IPU bare by themselves. We would replace that with XPU and use that term consistently going forward, and use that term, both these terms in all of the SmartNIC Summit slides and in the presentation, so that we're all consistent.
So Stephen, go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
And then Stephen, and then Jan.
Thanks, Joe. So those of us that have been around for a while may remember that we went down this path once before. We started going to XPU, and we ended up rolling that back, partly because it was confusing for new people as they were coming in, because they thought that that might also include GPUs and CPUs.
Yeah, and I was also in that camp of not liking it for that reason. But I think that, you know, I think we can kind of describe this as solving the problem with a TCAM is that, you know, we're doing a wild card, but it's not all possibilities. It's DPU and IPU. And I can imagine scenarios where you might have a system that's entirely based on what may be marketed as a CPU, but can you know, use the OPI APIs and be DPU IPU like. So, and you know, I could imagine GPU maybe someday doing that. So I think with a sentence like this, we can. I mean, we need more verbiage, obviously, but I think that over time we'll get the context right. That it's really only the DPU IP-like devices that we're referring to, and it's certainly better than the alternative, which is to, you know, fall on one side or the other of this alphabet war.
Well, and then Jan, go ahead, and then we'll see if anyone else has comments, and then I have two more comments about this, and then Stephen, I think you probably want to revisit as well. So Jan, go ahead.
Yeah, I try to keep it very brief. Steve already reminded everyone that we've done that path up to including going to analysts and kind of, you know, chasing everything down that rabbit hole. XPU is just too confusing, too generic, and potentially infringing on somebody else's already defined infrastructure. I'm just here to kind of remind people that we've been down that path. I know it's been a year or so. Just a reminder. On the opposite side, I also want to remind folks that what you're working on, what we're doing within OPI is great. And it's, in a way, focusing on how we address things, right? And then there is a market perception. If we are to go to market with, you know, present a new name, it's only going to confuse people more. GPUs, IPUs, whatever, they're not really very, very well known as of today. So as you know, as we go there, we could potentially create more damaging things, right?
Yeah, let me be super clear about a couple of things. The first one is that all of our outward facing material would be DPU, IPU.
Mm-hmm.
That's what OPI agreed to in the first place. So anyone's going to read, stay DPU, IPU. It's been that way the whole time. We leave it alone. No one cares. Doesn't matter. We just leave it alone and we're done with it. Okay, because you know, in reality, everyone knows what we're talking about, and they know why we're doing DPU, IPU, and it's fine. Okay.
Well, then if I may finish, then looking at the slide that's been presented here, and or whatever that new abbreviation or whatever in the new agreement is internally, and how to refer to something that may not even be in the future in the same form factor, or may come as a different, you know, differently packaged or integrated set of devices, right? Having an abstracted name probably better. I'm not going to argue one way or the other. I've been removed.
What do you mean by abstracted? What do you mean by abstracted name? You like OPN?
Yeah, open programmable node. That's a node. The node is a node. It could be a network node. It could be you know, compute node. It could take many places. I mean, could appear in many places. Could take many shapes. So, like, from that perspective, or whatever else you agree on in terms of like generic representation, I think would be better for the internal consumption, for, you know, for slacks, for short, you know, abbreviations, etc. Everyone who is a member or contributor will know what it is, will know exactly what it's talking about. And then as we go into vendor specific devices, they can potentially say, you know, more definitive, use more definitive terminology.
What we cannot do is in our slides and documents and, you know, marketing and descriptions start using the term OPN or XPU or any other term other than DPU or DPU IPU. Okay, what we cannot do is use only IPU. We cannot use OPN. We cannot use XPU for all of the stuff people would read or outward facing material. Okay.
Yeah.
Because that's disaster. That because no one will understand why we did that. And it's a terrible idea, honestly. So
Right.
so if OPI needs to retain DPU/IPU, I'm fine with that. If anyone has an objection, we could argue again. We could put it to a vote, but I don't think there's any harm. So I'm not gonna, I'm gonna argue against, making a change because we've been this way the whole time. That that isn't what's hurting us. That isn't what's important. So we just leave it. Okay. What we're talking about is in the code where you need a term to represent these single board computers that have all the stuff we associate with DPUs, IPUs, smart NICs, and that sort of thing. In the code, we need a short set of letters to represent it. Now, so we could use I guess we could use OPN in the code, replace all the XPU and all that in the code, but people, that one's not going to be as obvious to me as using XPU in the code. And again, the other piece is we want to minimize the use of that term as much as possible. So you only use that term where you absolutely have to. There really aren't that many references to it. I mean, you can do the search in GitHub and just see them, and you look and you're like, hey, there really aren't that many, right? And it's not used, so it's not used heavily, which is good. So the other part of the recommendation is that you don't use this term unless you absolutely need something to refer to the board as a whole in a script or a API or a model definition or something like that. And you should avoid it as much as possible so that we don't have it proliferate. So we're only talking about inside the code. Outward facing, I think we just stay what we're doing because to change it causes too many problems and it doesn't hurt us not to change it. Does that make sense to everyone? That's sort of where I ended up after reading the proposal and the whole thread and thinking about it. And then we can
well articulated, Joe. Yeah.
What's that?
I said well articulated, better than I did. So yeah, totally agreeing with that.
Venkat?
Yeah, I don't think we should get restarted on the IPU DPUs versus IPU/DPU. I think all the three of them sound good to me, and then that's fine. One suggestion though is to look at open programmable versus node versus open. Do you see it as open programmable / I mean, maybe not / accelerator node? That might communicate the abstract nature of it.
So when you describe things, you can talk about them as being open and programmable and having accelerators and having cores that can do offload processing or control plane. I mean, we do those presentations all the time. The other thing is, last year SNEA was using the term XPU to refer to these devices. So it's not a alien term for referring to DPUs. Now, and like I said last week, SNEA went back to using DPU only with the formation of the DPU SIG and the SNEA overall TSC and the CMSI, the compute memory storage team, and then DPU SIG is under that. And then the SNEA Network Storage Forum also has agreed that we'll just use the term DPU from a SNEA perspective because that's what SNEA decided overall. And actually, I didn't, just as a side note, I didn't even push for that. There were a number of other people who pushed for it, and I'm like, yeah, it works. Then I agreed. I said, yeah, it works for me, but I didn't even push. I wasn't even pushing for that. Anyway.
Okay, can I? Yeah, can I? So I mean, there's a subtle thing that Jan was mentioning. Maybe I'm just picking it, on top of and saying something on top, right? It is because it will get. I mean, you will see these IPU DPUs in different form factors. They could end up in appliance mode, and then smart TARs and things like that. So so is there an open programmable accelerator? Maybe it's not a node. So is there an OPA? Just to consider a few more things. If at all we want to use additional terms like OPN, I feel like maybe there are other alternatives that may be better than OPN that we could debate if there is a need for that. Otherwise, OPI
I don't think there's I mean, again, other than a few spots in the code where we do a compromise term and we just don't worry about it, I don't think introducing additional terminology will help anyone. So if I'm going to build a smart switch, or I'm going to build a intelligent port switch, or I'm going to build an accelerator switch, then the way I'm going to talk about this as I'm going to talk about it as I have embedded data processing units, which is true, in my switch or in my chassis or attached to my switch. That's how I would talk about it. That's the most reasonable way. And that's what people, I mean, honestly, people have talked about these things this way for, let's see, what year are we in? 25 years. So for 25 years, people have been building or attempting to build and sell smart switches, right? They were more primitive. They have a lot less capable, single core and an FPGA, but they were built and sold, and they were built and sold in the, tens of thousands of units at different times. And people had entire switches that were based on intelligent processing. And the way those were all talked about is, intelligent ports, smart ports, and that sort of thing. If we thought of the term, data processing unit for those ports, it would have been fantastic. Or even, infrastructure processing unit. So there were, but there wasn't a big industry push around that. It was a dozen internal companies doing it, or a dozen companies, and they just used their internal terminology that did this. Maybe 15 companies built these things over the years. So I don't know, Venkat, does that help? Because again,
I think I'm with you. It's just that creating additional term is not really necessary, because you're trying to solve two and adding third won't solve it. And if at all for whatever reason, if we need to do that, I somehow feel there are other alternatives that we could discuss. But I would rather not discuss and not create a new term.
Correct. Exactly. That's my feeling as well. What's the least objectionable compromise to close this so we don't have to talk about it again for about a year? Because every year we're going to have this discussion, and it's just a fact of the universe. It's just the way committees work.
I know I don't have my hand raised, but can I actually get a clarification from you, or Venkat? Is the sticking point right now the definition of the node, or the word node that is used?
No, so if we thought of OPN at some early time, I don't know, it might have been okay. I mean, there's nothing wrong with any of the terms, actually. All of the terms have merit, including actually XPU. But in fact, you could say, hey, what we really want is XPU everywhere, because we're thinking of a broad definition of open programmable interfaces and infrastructure. Right. But that's not where we ended up. So it isn't that there's anything wrong as such with OPN. OPA I like less well, because I like thinking of accelerators as a feature of these kind of boards as opposed to the board itself. But even that has some merit. So it's not a question of the merit of the term in and of itself. It's a question of whether introducing yet more new terminology. I mean, we're going with kind of the least objectionable terms that have already been used, and leave it status quo, forget about it, and just drive on, because in the end, it doesn't really matter very much, because people will learn what the terms are, what the jargon is, be comfortable with it, and go, okay, I understand why they did that. And they'll make jokes about it. And every term in computer science that's been created has jokes made about it. So we're okay. So does that make sense? So in other words, there's nothing wrong with OPN as such. It's just, what's the point? And all we're going to do is create more confusion as opposed to less, or leave the confusion the same. So I guess I'm advocating for leaving the confusion and annoyance level the same, because that's the minimum energy state of the system. And you can't really do better than that in the way we're set up, at least from an OPI point of view, based on the discussion last week and the week before. And then we can close this and be done with it. Boris, go ahead.
Two quick notes. First of all, I think we have so much technical discussions to do, and I'm really upset that we're talking for 2 TSC meetings about terminology and naming. I think that TSC is a technical steering committee, and we should focus on technical stuff. The project is not progressing in the right way. The project is not being contributed in the proper way, and we're wasting 2 meetings already discussing terminology. So I think we need to close this. I was the one that proposed this topic, and all I wanted to do, because SNIA dropped IPU from the name, I thought with a quick vote, we can forget Intel term and drop IPU and remain with single term DPU. I was thinking it's going to be 5-minute discussion, a quick vote, and we move on. I didn't want us to reinvent new terms or having a lengthy discussion. If Intel is the only one that using term IPU, I was thinking naively that we can just drop IPU term and use DPU across everything OPI related, exactly like SNIA voted and SNIA did. So with that, I don't want to continue with that. I want us to focus on technical things, because TSC need to help OPI become successful, and TSC should not discuss terms for 2 meetings, and we should continue with the technical things. We cannot close anything on lifecycle. We cannot close on APIs. We cannot close on lab. There is no testing infrastructure in place. Keysight stopped contributing to the demos and testing infrastructure. We need to address the technical terms in the TSC meetings. This is my personal feeling. And I'm really upset right now because we're spending 2 meetings on terminology. Thank you.
All right, so the proposal to close this is we leave things as they are. If you absolutely have to have a term in the code, use the one we're already using. It's in, I don't know, 60 something files and already, and we're done with it. Jan, go ahead.
Are you planning on, I mean, is this, and I'm not a voting member, I'm thinking that, you know, if we're gonna follow what you said, like, can we do something, fix it in time, and leave it alone for a year or so until, you know, new cohort comes along and they're gonna start questioning the postulates, right? Are you planning on voting on this today?
Yeah. Actually,
Okay.
I mean, again, this is already the policy. We actually technically don't need to vote. We just say we're going to leave it the way it is, and you know, we just have clarification on the policy. I can also call a vote on it, and I can call a vote today, and then we can not talk about this, like I say, until you know, basically that bear gets poked again. Anyone else? All right, so I'm going to do it this way. So I'm going to propose that we basically maintain status quo. We put DPU, IPU, or DPU, IPU like in our documentation and our presentations, as is our current policy. That in the actual code, where you need to use a term to represent the entire device, use XPU in any of its capitalization forms, we recommend strongly that we minimize the use of that term. So you only use that term where absolutely necessary. If you have comments in the code, then use DPU/IPU, or again, if it's a vendor interface, you can use DPU or IPU individually, because that's for that vendor interface and that's their terminology. Right. So we don't restrict if you need a vendor interface what that terminology is. That's sort of the complete proposal. So what I'd like to do is call a vote on that being the policy. I'll vote by, if you object, raise your hand in chat right now, if you're a voting member. So if you want to vote no, that's not a good idea, we need to do something different, then raise your hand. And when you raise your hand, you need to see, basically what we're going to do is say, well, then make a proposal to vote on. Okay, so going once, going twice. Okay, so no one's objected. If anyone objects to that style of voting, also type in the chat or speak up. You don't have to put your hand up, just speak up. Otherwise, we'll declare this one closed, and we'll go with the proposal I just articulated. And Dan, if you don't mind writing that down as the conclusion for this thing, and then we'll ratify the pull request and say that's, and then post it, and that's our policy.
Yep, and just point of process, I will close this pull request. I will open a new one on the README.
Right.
And I updated this line a couple times during our discussion. So, but we can wordsmith it when I do that pull request.
Yeah, do that, and then it'll take an hour total, and we'll be done with it. All right.
Sounds good.
Okay, so now let's go to the all right, next topic. What's the status in the lifecycle and provisioning group on the PCI behavior for DPUs? So I think that's an important one to close on, even if we say the PCI spec already has everything we need and we just need to get people to conform, then we should say that. But it didn't seem like that from the amount of technical discussion going on, and I haven't seen progress on that thread in a month. And I was expecting that to be closed, and that's something we can publish and say, hey, OPI compliant DPU shall have this behavior, and here's the approaches, and here's why they're important. And the whole industry really needs to follow that, even if you're not going to follow anything else on DPUs, because if these things don't behave well in servers, and we know they don't all right now because we've done integrations, and so some of you, then we're going to be in a world of hurt when we scale these systems. And the people using OPI and the people using DPUs for various solutions are going to be very annoyed. They're still going to use them. It's just, they're going to be quite irritated with the fact that they're having to do workarounds all the time. And they're still going to use them because the value proposition is clear, which is why we're all here. So what's the status, and why isn't that closed?
I think since you're lucky in the chair, I can speak up.
Yeah. Well, so you start, because again, you were driving this, and again, somebody else is going to pick it up as chair, but to drive it. But go ahead and give the summary, and then I know other people have been active in that group. Vipin and Dan and Venkat and Mark and Mircea and Keith and others.
So first of all, I'm posting a link in the chat so people can open the page and look for themselves. We have currently 3 proposals on the table. First proposal is to change PCI Express spec and go into PCI Express SIG in order to introduce new register to all the status of the booting process of the DPUs. That's the first proposal. We call it in-band proposal because it doesn't require having board management controller, and it's all done between the host CPU and the DPU. proposal number 1. This was proposed by HP, and HP is advocating for this option very strongly. The second option was proposed by Dan, by Intel. Driver ready check. Basically, this option talks about do nothing, status quo, also kind of in-band in UEFI solution. But basically, if you're not compliant with PCI Express, it's your problem. And if you are, then this proposal will do the trick. The third option, NVIDIA stated this is the only option that NVIDIA is agreeing to go forward. So Ronnie here represented NVIDIA. You can correct me if I'm wrong. But the third option is what we've been doing so far is out-of-band management. So basically, NVIDIA position is that platform or server BMC is the only one responsible coordinating the boot between the host CPU and the DPU cards. And its only job, its job to do that. So that's a proposal for out-of-band using the platform BMC management if DPU is inserted in the server. We currently cannot make a vote and cannot make a suggestion because there is no agreement inside the technical working group of which direction to take. And this is why you haven't seen any progress.
All right, other people on this one.
Boris, I have a comment on this one. So it looks like you had polled in not the last week, in the last meeting we had, not this week, but the week before. And most of us agreed to go with number 3. And this was a very informal poll, I agree, but still it may be worth just double checking that 3 is the most agreed upon from various vendors. But I think that's what happened. We can go back to recordings.
We did a small poll. I don't feel comfortable with the amount of participants we're having to make this decision. This is quite a big decision, so I agree with you, Vipin, but the comfortable level that I had is very low.
Okay, makes sense.
Okay.
Do we want to review the poll here? My recollection is the same as well. At least from Intel perspective, we're fine with all 3 proposals. So, you know, I think it really needs to just be a poll across the vendors. I think if we have the vendors, you know, sort of if there's only one solution that works for all vendors, then that's what we should go with. I don't think that we're precluding, you know, other solutions that are more PCI compliant, but we are finding a solution for when you need that coordination. So you know, I think that we probably have the right people right now to make some progress, or at least state that is our intended direction, and chase down any objections. You know,
so we need to do this so we need a concrete proposal that then needs to be brought in with a summary, and you know, what's the main point of the approach and why it's either the best or the least objectionable, depending on, you know, which spot in the curve you're optimizing for. And we then vote. Then we have to vote on it. This may require some people to go study and think about this, you know, wider than just the lifecycle and provisioning discussions. And if we don't, so I think we need a proposal, and we need to then vote on the proposal, just like for the, you know, we do for less, I would say less technical things and more terminology, political things. We need a proposal. So I assume we're saying it's number 3 is the one that was the straw man favored, the straw poll favored. Did I hear that right?
That's what I heard, but
that's our direction. Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
So why don't we, I think I'm gonna collectively take the AR for the vendors to say, let's you know, let's put together the proposal for 3 and bring it to the TSC. So I think
Yep.
that it should be on us, the vendors, to say this is what we agreed to. I can take the AR to at least chase everyone down. The documentation is already there. It's quite good. So I think this is more of just a summary of being able to say, what does it even mean when we say option 3? So that we take the AR for that.
Okay. And could we have that proposal for next week, next Thursday?
Yep. That's my plan.
Then that'll be agenda item for next week. Along a similar vein, in 2 weeks, we're going to have a proposal for or at least a description and discussion and review of IPDK OPI storage plans. So IPDK is using OPI for storage and storage interfaces now. And so we're going to have Artek and Philip come in and describe how and why and what for that project.
Joe, logistics on that is right during the SmartNIC Summit. Do you want to have a meeting on the 15th or push
That's actually a good point. Shoot. I guess we can delay that one a week because that one won't be ready for next week. Okay, we'll do it the week after. We'll have to do it. We'll have to do it the week after. They were going to do it next week, but other commitments, and I guess it's a Polish holiday, so it's not possible. All right, I guess we'll have to do it for the next week. But anyway, so we'll have that coming in as well. And that's an interesting one because it basically shows how we can make these projects actually work. All right, so we have the AR. So let me stop sharing that and go back to sharing this guy. There we go. All right, so view at the 8th. Okay. All right. I want to leave test coverage because that's kind of a general topic. Till the end. All right. Key site storage demo. Progress, not progress, and I guess the other projects as well, right? We had 4 or 5 project proposals from about maybe 6 weeks ago, just before I went on vacation. Do we have progress on any of those that's worth reporting? And start with key site.
Not on the storage demo. The only progress it's on the lab with parts. I asked for some quotes, but I need now basically a shipping address and who receiving person and the phone number for the lab portion for the components.
Okay, so you have mechanical stuff in the way on the lab, and the storage proposal is holding due to the lab work.
No, I mean, I can make the demo in my own lab. I already bought one server from Dell, one from HP. I have the DPUs in my lab. No, the storage is not hanged on that. It's just on time available to complete it.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So you're prioritizing the lab work right now for your OPI contribution over the demo work so that the lab can get going, which is okay. I mean, again, you got to prioritize yourself, but just, just trying to understand. And what about just trying to understand? And, maybe having the demo would be useful, but again, we can't stall on the lab either. I don't know. What do you think, Murcha?
Yeah, I mean, it's like the household once somewhere is bullshit. I cannot drop.
Cutting out really badly, Mauricio.
Yeah. Fortunately, I'm somewhere between some skills. So, for now.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
if-
All right. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know, Venkat, if you can step in somehow, because
Yeah.
that's not parsable.
Yeah, so I think the storage demo is a separate tracked versus the lab. These two are not one versus another. On the lab side, I think, unless we have a shippable address for him, that's where he's stuck. On the storage demo, I think, it's just a matter of prioritizing something else versus that. But I will, so there is one update though that we need to, that we need to come back to. On the testing group, Boris asked a generic question on a couple of things he did and what next after that. So that is something that maybe, I'll talk to Mircha offline and ask him to address. I know he did some work. He checked in generic traffic generators. In a way, it adds a little bit of a framework in some sense. It's not a whole thing, but and then that F5 is supposed to use. So I don't have an update on that. So I'll ask him and make sure that we put an update into the group like in a day or two.
Okay. All right. Other demos and projects.
I'm
that
sorry,
were-
Joe. I didn't quite understand the last
Hey, go ahead.
discussion.
Yeah, go ahead and ask.
No, the question is very simple. We committed to do the demos. We're not progressing in the pace that we wanted to. We identify the demos that we need to do. We started with networking. We do the IPsec. We need to do the storage. The storage demo has been postponed for quite a while. I understand Mercer is not, 100% on OPI. That's fine. But as an OPI community, as an open source project, we need to get things going, right? We cannot rely on one person to be not available and stuff like that. We need to identify whether it's existing groups or a new group that need to be created, or we define that demos are extremely important to the OPI success. So we need to get that going. Compliance testing, I think we cannot move forward without having that. There is no contribution. I would even propose that we name specific people that are responsible for specific areas, because we can talk slides and markdown pages for quite a bit. But if we are here to produce code, we need to show that, and we need to start contribution of the code, even in form of testing, which is junior engineers usually. You don't have to put very qualified people here. But I don't see any commitment from anybody in this space. We're talking about it, we're discussing it, but I see all the representatives on the TSC call here from all the companies that formed and joined lately the OPI. None of them gave, except Intel, none of them gave actual contributors, people who contribute the code. We need to rectify that somehow. We need to choose people and give a straight answer. Who are the maintainers of the repositories that we have created? Who are the contributors? I'm also not 100% of OPI. If people think I am, it's just because I'm using my personal time to do this stuff. But we need to get these things going.
Anyone, thoughts, comments? All right, think about this. It's important stuff. We're at time, so we'll call this meeting, and we'll pick up here with basically existing project plans and how we can drive more progress next time. All right, thank you, everyone.